Good morning, and welcome to the very first video of my brand new channel, Battle City Remix. Let me start off by kind of setting the stage and then asking an important question that sets the tone for everything that's going to come afterwards. Battle City is often considered one of the best arcs in all of Yu-Gi-Oh! I think everyone who was into the card game and the anime at some point tried to recreate the decks from their favorite characters, whether it be Yugi or Joey or Kaiba. But have you ever stopped to consider who would have actually won Battle City? If you take away the magic, the absurd card effects, and the blatant cheating from some characters, which deck would have actually reigned supreme? We're going to try and do our best to determine who truly would be the Battle City champion. To kick things off, let's go over the rule set. We're going to be using a combination of the traditional TCG format rulings as well as the Battle City rules. When we constructed our decks, we used as many cards used by that character as possible that exist in the TCG. We aren't using any OCG, Japanese-only cards. We're not using any Orica cards. We're not using any anime-only cards. So things like the spell of Quick Attack that allowed fusion monsters to attack on their first turn, not being used. Fusion monsters are just going to be able to attack. There's no reason to prevent that. The majority of characters in Battle City only dueled once. So because of that, most of their decks are built out of a lot of cards that fill the spirit and the theme of what those decks and those characters were trying to achieve, because deck lists don't really exist for a lot of those characters. We also heavily considered cards used by those characters in previous seasons. We tried to avoid cards from future seasons where possible, simply because they bring a level of power to the cards and the decks that don't necessarily fit with what we're trying to achieve here for Battle City. And especially if the cards will fundamentally change how the deck operates, we try to avoid anything like that. There will be a few exceptions, but mostly it's for balance, because these decks range anywhere from bad to barely functional. Sorry about that. So some of the other rules, the Ante rule will be in place at the beginning of the duel before it starts. We'll go over what each of the characters and their decks are anteing. In the show, the ante tended to be their most valuable card or their rarest card. We took kind of a loose interpretation of that as cards that were maybe the most valuable or rare or potentially useful to the character who's receiving them. That is to say, if any of the characters announced what their anime card was in the show, or rather what their ante card was in the show, that is the card that we use. If it was a character whose ante was never revealed, such as Arcana, we will fill in what makes the most sense for both Arcana's deck value as well as what Yugi would want from that deck. So you can interpret that how you will. We're keeping it extremely limited on changing any of the card effects from what they did in the show. Pretty much everything shows exactly what the TCG says it will do, with the exception of these three cards in front of us. We have Giltia the D, Flame Swordsman, and the Winged Dragon of Ra. The reason these three cards are being changed is because they cannot be used the way they were used in the show, even though they are cards that do exist in the TCG and have a function. What we're changing for these two cards is simply that we're treating them as vanilla monsters. Flame Swordsman and Giltia will be treated as if they are normal level 5 warrior monsters. And they'll be in Joey's deck, and he will be able to summon them as such, because he did in the show, and in my mind, it doesn't really change how his deck plays. It doesn't really give him any benefits. If anything, it's a detriment to how strong his deck is. The only other exception to our very strict card rulings is the Winged Dragon of Ra, and the only change we're making is we're giving him one of the anime effects, which really should have been on the card when it was printed, and future cards have actually changed that. He's going to have his effect, the Great Maju Garzit effect, where all of the monsters that are attributed to summon him will collectively add to his attack. So his attack and defense will be the collective of the three that are attributed to summon him. Other than that, every other card is going to be exactly how it appears. To add to card effects, if a card operates in a way that is in the anime that is fundamentally different from the way that it operates in the TCG, there's a good chance we may not use it. And the biggest example I can come up with is Tribute Burial, which allows Merrick to summon a monster by using tributes from his graveyard. However, the card strictly says only monsters that require 2 sacrifices. Merrick doesn't have any level 7 or 8 monsters that he can summon through his own tributes. It would only be Lava Golem, which he cannot summon through the effect of that card anyway. So that's been left out. There are other examples, but we'll go over those in a future video when we go over deck profiles. If there's a card that exists in the TCG that is an effective stand-in for an anime-only card, we also did consider some of those. An example would be in Arcana's deck. He used a card called Shadow Balance. Doesn't exist in the TCG, but Pineapple Blast does, and it effectively does the same thing. So we use Pineapple Blast in that case because it just makes sense for what Arcana's deck is trying to achieve. It doesn't dramatically alter or change the power level of his deck in that context. If you have any ideas for cards that would be effective stand-ins for other cards that were anime only, please let me know in the comments. I always love to hear that type of thing. I'm always interested in tweaking these decks and altering them and making them a little bit more true to form of what we wanted them to originally look like. The format for the duels will be the traditional tournament format of a match, best 2 out of 3. And we'll be using 8,000 life points, not 4,000. We felt that this change is drastic, but it gives each of the decks the best possible opportunity to succeed. And it especially helps some of the more convoluted decks pull off some of their really weird, wacky combos. It gives them some extra time because 4,000 life points goes very fast. In all of our test duels, we found that it simply doesn't give most of the decks a chance to succeed. The main reason for this whole tournament is to figure out who truly has the best deck in all of Battle City. In a lot of ways, the anime didn't really fulfill that goal for me because it's more about telling the story of the show, telling Yugi's story through his use of cards, and kind of how that all ties together with other characters and their narratives and goals and what they're trying to achieve. This is not that. This is just trying to see who has the best cards. And in a lot of ways, the anime did things that really gave a false perspective of what these decks are capable of. You know, when Kaiba starts a duel and his hand is 3 Blue Eyes, 2 Flutes of Summoning Dragon, and a Pot of Greed that then allows him to draw Lord of Dragons and Hyuzenru, and the next turn he top decks Obelisk. That would be the most spectacular hand in all of this game. I've never seen anything like that happen in any of the duels we've had, and it happens every single duel in this show. So we're giving it a little bit of a different perspective here. And lastly, on a personal note, I'm going to try really hard to keep all my videos nice and tight and well edited. This is by far and away the wordiest video I'm going to have, the most talky one, with the least number of card games being played because there's none. Because I don't really want to waste your time, and I want to make this a lot of fun. So with all of that said, let's get to it. Yeah, okay.